Hi, everyone. Professor Minglu here again. And my special guest today is Jerry Sun. Jerry is actually a friend of mine from Bible study, but I had him come here today because he's actually the Senior Director of Demand Planning and Analytics for a company called Green Dot Corporation. Now, Green Dot is a Fortune 500 company based in Pasadena, California, and it's known to be a finance technology company. And they are actually the world's largest prepaid debit card company. Now, I asked Jerry to come do this video with me today because right now, analytics, or specifically data analytics, is the biggest buzz around college campuses. And recruiters everywhere, especially the big four firms, are saying that's the future of accounting. So I thought, hey, why not have Jerry, who's an expert in this field, come do this video so that he can share some insights about analytics with my students. So Jerry, hey, thank you so much for making the time to come speak to my students.
Yeah, happy to do this, Bing.
Great, thank you. So my first question for you, Jerry, is as I mentioned earlier, data analytics is a really hot topic today, right now in 2019. However, there may be some of my viewers who have no idea what it is. So could you just explain it in simple terms? Like what is analytics? What is data analytics?
Yeah, good question. So data analytics, to me, it spans a large range of functions, right? It can go from something as simple as just reporting on, putting together a report of summarizing data, all the way to something as complex as, the data science field where, people in that role usually have a PhD in either mathematics or statistics or even economics, where they're capable of running, complex models. And everything in between would span in my book, my definition of data analytics. And it's because right now data is cheap to store, and every single thing you do is stored in a database somewhere. And people are looking, not people, but businesses are looking for insights, always looking for insights to increase demand, increase sales, whatever the case may be. And so everyone knows that there's something to glean from the data that they've stored, and it's just a need for people to mine it. Figure out what is that golden nugget that can give you sort of an answer today to help business tomorrow. And so, with the growing the amount of data that's just piling up every day, business is always looking for people to crunch it, look for insight, and that's why it's growing.
Got it. Now, I want to ask you something else, and that is, at the very beginning, I mentioned to my viewers that you're the Senior Director of Demand Planning and Analytics at Green Dot Corporation. So I know there may be some of my students who someday might aspire to be in your current position. So could you tell my students, what are your main duties in your current role? And what is a typical day like for you? Is there even a typical day?
Yep, good question, man. So demand planning is specifically a supply chain function. So the analytics that I do is really supply chain focused. And so demand planning means being able to forecast demand using historical data in order to plan inventory. So in that sense, the forecasting piece day to day is pretty much the same. So my team manages specific pieces of the business, and they provide the forecast to our planners so that they can plan inventory. The other side of my role is the analytics piece, and that's where the day-to-day is different. That side is really revolves around problem solving. So, and I give you an example. Within supply chain, there might be issues with sales overall, right? You might see sales dip. And then the question that I get, and a lot of times supply chain gets, is, whoa, what's going on with sales? Are we out of stock? And so that's sort of that's the one-off situation where it's not day to day. It's give me a believable, I want to say believable reason as to why sales are down. And so having that problem is where we go and figure out, okay, what information do we have? How do we look at that information to arrive at the conclusion? And so that piece of the analytics is different day to day, week to week, different times of the year. The problems are always changing.
Got it. So my next question is, most colleges as of today in 2019, they actually don't offer a undergraduate degree in data analytics. Maybe someday in the future, but as of right now, no. So what do most students have to major in order to work in this profession? Are there certain preferred majors, for example, mathematics, statistics, economics, accounting? Are those the preferred majors? Or what about students who major in liberal arts? What are you guys looking for in terms of majors?
That's a really good question, Ming. And I want to rephrase that question and say we're not looking for a specific major per se. We're looking for skill sets, right? Because in analytics, there's two key functions, and one is the obvious. Can you crunch data? Do you understand the quant side of numbers? The other side of it that's less talked about is, can you communicate those results cohesively and in a way that upper management or leadership who doesn't have your experience in the numbers to understand and actually action on it, right? And so communication skills is just as important as the quant skills. So with having said that, I would say you do have to have some statistics understanding, some mathematics under your belt, uh, some econ under your belt. Those are all helpful coursework. But that doesn't rule out your liberal arts or your other majors where communication is important. So the combination of the two makes for a good employee and a good hire. So that's what I would say as far as majors are concerned.
Well, that makes sense. And I do appreciate you bringing the fact up that communication skills are very important, right? I tell my students all the time, it's great that you can sit down and crunch all those numbers, but if you can't communicate that to people you're working with and create actionable items, then that's no use, right? So you have to have both strong communication skills as well as strong analytical skills. So thank you for confirming what I normally share with my students. So the next thing I want to ask, this is kind of related to the previous question, is that some colleges actually offer some courses in data analytics, and some schools may even offer certificates. So I saw online that Harvard University actually offers a certificate in data analytics. Now that's wonderful, but the downside is it's really, really expensive. So I wanted to ask you, you guys hire students all the time, right? Fresh out of college. How many classes in data analytics do you expect for them to have taken?
Really good question. Yes, there are a lot of certifications out there right now from a lot of universities, and a lot of them are online too. So it doesn't mean you even have to go out there. So, and they are expensive. What I will say is when we're looking to hire, I'm looking for a couple things, right? I mentioned earlier, you got to have the quant background. So I'm looking for some math courses, some statistic courses. So probably 2-3 courses in those areas would be helpful. But then I'm not saying I rule it out, but I do also look at any skills beyond just those classes that you've taken. So for instance, when you say these certification courses for analytics, like what are they teaching you? Well, what I've seen as far as coursework is concerned, they're teaching you the tools to solve problems in the business world. So a lot of hypothetical problems, but what the tools that they're teaching you aren't things like Excel, things in the Microsoft Office suite. They're looking for tools they're trying to teach you tools that businesses actually use day to day. So for instance, data analytical tools like SAS, R, or Python. Some of those are open source, and some of those are you need to pay for. So those definitely help give you a leg up, but a lot of times it's not necessarily required. It's not expected that someone coming out of undergrad would have those skill sets, because that's just not the part of the coursework. So if you were interested, looking into that outside of your coursework would be really helpful. Like I said earlier, R and Python are open source. There's a lot of information on the internet for you to look at, and even just brush up on some of that, what they can do, and so forth. The other thing I will say also is there's a lot of reporting software out there called MicroStrategy, Tableau, business objects. A lot of these things are specific to each individual business, but that doesn't mean they're not common in the business world. So a lot of companies use these types of software. So just knowing about them, maybe brushing up on that, could be really helpful. So I want to say coursework is concerned, quant work, but just understanding sort of what are the tools that are out there will also give you a leg up in the interview process, and when you're discussing, what types of requirements they're looking for, it definitely helps.
Well, that's good to know that they don't necessarily have to take a sort of, like certificate, right? Or complete a certificate, because that's very, very expensive. So that's good to know. So I have one last question to kind of just wrap it up. You shared a lot of great information. Is there any other advice you can share with my students if they want to work in data analytics?
Yeah. I think what I will say is this is a growing field, and it's just going to get bigger. There's going to be a lot of automation in this field, as the simple stuff gets taken over by a machine, and then the more complex things a human still has to do. So get in it as early as you can. And one of the critical things that I hadn't mentioned earlier was the fact that it's because everything is now stored in a database. There's a querying language called SQL or SQL that would be really helpful if you brushed up on that. It's pretty simple to use. It's not too hard. It's very logical. But if you knew that ahead of time, and just brushed up on that before applying to any job, that could go a long way.
Well, great. Hey, Jerry, I really appreciate you taking the time to come speak to my students today to make this video. And I also want to mention to my viewer, Jerry, this is actually Jerry's second time doing this video with me. So he made a video with me earlier, but I somehow accidentally deleted it. So, well, actually, the recording didn't turn on. So I really appreciate Jerry coming to do this video again the second time. All this information that you shared, I think it will make a huge difference for my students who are considering, going into the field of data analytics. So thank you very much, Jerry, and I look forward to seeing you soon.